How is it that you lead a technical call, especially when you're worried or not that technical at all? Hi, guys. My name's Deepak Shukla, founder at the Pearl Lemon Group. We are a business growth and development agency based in the UK, USA, as well as serving clients worldwide. And if you need any support with communications training, whether internally or with your clients, then please do reach out to us. And we're back today with day number 41 of our communications training series. But before we get into it, feel free to click the link in the description below to get access to 7 additional strategies that are not shared in this training. So look, there's going to be times when you're called in to two calls that are just above your depth fundamentally when it comes to the nature of the call. So there's a couple of things to consider when moving or heading into that call in general. So first of all, let's just give a nod to, if you are technical, then what are the do's and don'ts, I would say. I'll go into a couple of things. So number one, make sure on the call that it's actually a technical call. So now, why is the reason that I say that? Because the amount of conversations I've had when I'm being introduced to that technical person, and I discover that it's not as technical as I thought it would be, is quite significant. Okay, so that's just something to know, that in 4 out of 5 circumstances, when I go onto a call that's I'm going to meet the other side's web development person or technical person or otherwise, it tends to not be massively technical. The most technical calls I've been on, well, we'll come to the most technical calls that I've been on, but you can make sure on the call, that it's actually, well, of course you want to know this before going into the call. So I guess there's a couple of points here. In my experience, anecdotally, 1 in 5 calls that are meant to be technical actually end up being technical. So let that be of some reassurance to you. That's number one. Number two, you can make sure on the call there's actually a technical call, and that will often reveal itself based upon, they've got some questions. Brilliant. Let's go through your questions. Deepak, I've got XYZ person here today. Amazing. Let's go through some of the questions that you've got. So you can establish that on the call. And what will sometimes often happen is that you can always, and this is where it relates to point two, always know at least some technical stuff. So technical stuff is very broad, and I'm going to give you some kind of insights to some of that. So technical stuff can qualify as jargon, explanation of a theory, how to use a program. So they would be probably the 3 areas. So jargon could be, you know, audio kinesthetic training, or the semantics of our discussion, or using words that relate to something within the field of, for example, communication. So we're going to look at it from a neuro-linguistic perspective. So when we begin to categorize some of these elements, we must consider the minutiae. So that would be some example of jargon. Okay, so knowing some of the jargon that relates to the field that you're going to be discussing is super important. So I would keep a vocabulary or glossary list of some kind if you think it's going to be of that nature. Explanation of a theory. So and here's the interesting part. Explanation of a theory, of course, requires you to understand the theory, and you understand the theory by Googling the theory and reading a combination of potentially a blog and or Wikipedia, something to that effect. But when you explain a theory, most often you're explaining it to the audience in a non-technical fashion. So it would oftentimes be explaining something that's technical at a, for example, 9th grade level, as opposed to a postgraduate level. Now, you can end up needing to explain something at a postgraduate level to someone who's technical themselves. In my experience, that doesn't happen too much. Why? Because, well, a lot of it depends upon the nature of the conversations that you have, of course. This is for people that are client relationship managers that aren't, for example, out and out web developers. I don't have the expertise to have calls where we go into, for example, the nuances of React.js, or it doesn't even have to be in relation to web development. Web development is just a good example of it. But certainly, again, if you at least know some technical stuff, some of the jargon, explanations of theories. For example, what is your browser cache? What does that relate to when it comes to server side and client side or laptop side information? How does a CDN work? A cloud distribution network? How does that help speed up a website? So looking at or content data network. Now I'm getting confused as to the meaning of the acronym, whilst I know what the term actually means. But this is where, and I'm just beginning to make some pointers towards explanations of theories. You do need to have an understanding of the theory overall and then have an ability to explain it. If there's going to be some demonstrations of how to use a program, as an example, then certainly you want to ultimately know how to use that program in advance. So the ways that you can quickly learn are YouTube. I mean, it's a standard stuff, so I won't maybe put that, but always know at least some of the technical stuff and prepare in advance. So preparing in advance, of course, just makes a lot of sense. But then number 4 is lead. So if you're a client relationship manager, as long as you clarify number 1 on the call, this is actually a technical call. Okay. If it isn't, then 2 and 3 don't really apply. But if it is a technical call, then 2 definitely does apply. So you need to come to the call with at least a glossary, depending upon the nature of the call. If it's a video call, you can't really then just have your notes to refer to because you'll always look away. If it's a call without video, then you can definitely do it. But knowing some jargon, being able to explain certain theories, demonstrating how to use a program, if you can move between all 3, you will come across as someone who's got a high level of technical competence. And that's always going to help you, especially if you're the client relationship manager, because it's not always assumed the client relationship manager can do stuff like that, but it's always preferred if the client relationship manager can do stuff like that. So definitely number 2 is important. Preparing in advance kind of goes without saying, but do prepare in advance. I'll underline it because you want to be able to do 2 well, because otherwise, for someone like myself, if you come to a call, it'll be clear you're doing it for the first time as you're doing it with me. Unless you announce that and you're trying to cover that, it will cause problems. And then, number 4 is leading the call away from the technical stuff. So, in calls, there's a couple of different elements. There's, the commercial side, there's the technical side, and there's the, let's say let's call it the day-to-day reporting, if you will. So you want to move it into commercial, day-to-day reporting, or strategy. So strategy is, commercial is what's the outcome we're looking for. We want to make £1 million. What's the strategic side? Well, how do we get to the £1 million? And then day-to-day reporting is, what is the updates on that activity that we're engaging upon to get to the £1 million? And then the technical side is, let's look at the technical components of some of those individual activities. So if you break it down in that fashion, then you can decide to steer it towards commercial, day-to-day, or strategy. And being aware, lead the calls into these spaces. So I'd say that kind of sits by itself, because there's other things you can lead it away from also. But just like personal chit chat, just saying, okay, great, let's look at the reports at the end of the week and other things. So there you have it, guys. They are the 5 steps that you can engage upon that will help you outside of all of the things we've already discussed, because I'm not going to repeat history. Please do go back to the other training, but this is how you can help lead technical calls.